Everybody, and welcome to another Cars and Coffee. I'm Kenny Brown. Over the next hour or so, I'm going to answer some of your questions, and we're going to talk about some things that are interesting based on my vast experience in motorsports. It's Saturday morning. We had a late night last night with the workshop. Incidentally, the Transform Your Driving Experience workshop went extremely well this week. It was supposed to be 5 days. It was going to go to 6 because there was just so much to cover. Really couldn't even get all of it covered in that. Some really positive feedback. And it's going to be a bonus session on Monday night. And if you haven't joined or signed up for the Transform Your Driving Experience workshop, you can still do that. You can watch Monday night's program, and then their reruns will be available up through Tuesday night at midnight, and then they're going to be taken down. So there's still time to get in the workshop. It's been really good. I've had a good time, and people have learned a lot. And some of this morning is going to be from, I shouldn't say leftover, but some things we covered in the workshop I thought were pretty interesting. And I've got something really, really cool to show you as we go along. As far as the quick hitters this morning, Tim Tomasak answered this last night in the workshop, but he asked about rebuilding Brembo brakes. And I've got a couple of thoughts on that. If you do rebuild them, you need to be sure you inspect everything. You need to get them apart, clear everything off with brake clean, inspect them really well, and you need to get a rebuild kit from Brembo. I'm sure you can get that online. But when I used to rebuild calipers, many years ago, I had a special assembly lube just for brake calipers. And so if you do that, be sure you find some assembly lube just to make it so it goes together and you don't tear any of the seals. For our customers that are really heavy track guys and the race guys with the Bear brakes, what I recommend is they just, at the end of the season, send them back to Bear, get them rebuilt by the guys that know what they're doing, because oftentimes they will find things that you don't. A good example is Roy sent his brakes back with a little bit of a leak, and they found a little scar of the piston. They got it fixed, back to him, works perfectly. So it's kind of like there's two ways to do it. With the Bears, they'll rebuild them and come back like brand new. Rich, we'll get into brakes a little more here in a minute. Rich Amara had a question about this, interesting about Celine's. The 87 89 Celine whale tail rear wing add any rear functional downforce or efficiencies for the Fox body. Is there anything else that can be done or added to improve upon the function of the Celine wing? If not, what is the rear wing aero setup? It would be the next step. Okay, I obviously have a lot of experience with the Celine whale tail. And what's interesting is the one that we had on 87 cars, 86 and 87 cars were actually smaller, believe it or not, smaller than the original Celine wing. We had one of those for the race team just in case you wanted to add it, but we never did. Now, that's like 30-some years ago, but knowing now, what I know now, looking back at it, I think those, realistically, there's no aero data that I know of for it, but I think realistically it looks more like they may, they're a really good looking piece. I think they probably would add more drag than downforce. And the reason I say that is because when you want to create rear downforce, the purpose of the wing is to get air flowing over and under it so that you create negative pressure to pull the car down. When you put a little spoiler up in the back, the whole idea is to spoil the flow of the air over the trunk so it goes up over the lip of the spoiler, and you create some negative air behind it that holds the car down. With a whale tail, it was like a great big tray that kind of held air. I think it maybe put some downforce in, but I think the downforce drag ratio was higher on drag than downforce. That's just my thoughts. As far as other options, I've got several wing options. If you want to call in, it's a good time to mention the 15-minute consults. Sort of do by popular command, and we started this for the people that are in the workshop. Carrie has opened up my schedule to do some 15-minute consults, complimentary 15-minute consults, and right now they're only open to the people in the speed in the workshop. But after Monday or Tuesday?
After Monday.
After Monday, any of the slots that are still open that anybody from the Speed Therapy Society can sign up for. So, kind of a little diversion, but kind of got a plug in there for the 15 minutes. I've got a number of different options. Most of them, like universal, you have to make them fit, but I've got several wing options if you like to set up a 15-minute, and it just kind of depends on what you're doing. If you're it's a track car, street car, full-on race car, I've got a couple different wing options for you. Okay, so I got the consoles in, snuck the consoles in, and the Transform Your Driving Experience works. I said that there's a bonus night Monday night, so you can still sign up, get in, and then you can also watch all the reruns for days 1 through 5. And we're in the middle of a rainstorm right now. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but it's these buildings are not very quiet. So I wanted to talk a little bit about brakes. Of course, send your questions in. We'll answer some questions live a little bit later. Some more housekeeping is we will not be here 4th of July weekend, taking the 4th of July off. We'll be back the second Saturday, which is the 11th, I believe. So mark that in your calendars. Not really. You'll remember that because you probably have plans for 4th of July too. So we're taking 4th of July off back the second Saturday. And Speed Therapy Society workshop. I'm getting ahead of all the notes that you gave me. Okay, if you're just joining us, and that's something I always forget, I have to be written down. If you're just joining us, I'm Kenny Brown. This is Cars and Coffee. And over this hour or so, I'm going to share with you some of my extensive background and knowledge in professional motorsports and building high-performance cars, track cars, race cars, and all kinds of cars. So, if you're not a member of the Speed Therapy Society, you need to be a member of the Speed Therapy Society. We've got like over 400 members now, which is pretty cool. And that's where there's a lot of resources. There's guides in there. The unit section, which has a lot of resources for people. Things that I talk about, we just kind of plug them into the resources. So, if you're not a member, join. And like I say, you can still sign up for the workshop. So let's kind of like move along to some brake tech this morning. And kind of feeds off of Tim's question on rebuilding of Brembos. Brakes, you know what? I got a sheet here that tells me all my brake pad thicknesses. Brake pads, come in a variety of. Where are you? Maybe I don't have them.
Maybe I'll talk about it next week. Let's go over brake pads next week.
Huh. Oh, I guess I don't have it right here. Brakes kind of boil down into brakes, pad, fluid, lines. And what we talked about in the workshop is the different types of brakes. We talked about having stainless steel lines. If you don't have stainless steel lines and you're doing track days, I strongly recommend it, simply because brakes get hot. Brake fluid gets hot, and if you still have rubber OE lines, they'll get hot and soft, and they could give you a spongy pedal because they'll expand when they're hot. The stainless steel brake lines are just solid. They'll give you a super hard pedal all the time. So the other thing we talked about is bleeding the brakes, and I'm just super strong proponent on bleeding brakes. I've got my little demo thing over here. This is our street performance package. This is a really nice brake. It's pretty cost effective. It's a 6-piston. It comes with a 2-piece slotted rotor. It's at 1.15, something like that. And the brake pads are a common OE pad, so they're not stupid expensive. And for street performance, for occasional track, this is a great brake package because I've got maybe 20 different brake compounds that you can choose from. Actually, if you don't know what brake can, you can figure out what you're doing and come up with a brake compound, because you always have to match the brake compound with the heat temperature range the brakes are working in. There's three things about brake pads. There's friction, wear, and heat. And compounding brake pads, especially for track or race, are compounded a specific heat range. If you get beyond that heat range, the wear goes super fast and the friction goes down and they just go away really quickly, which is why street pads just don't work on the track. I've seen so many times people have shown up, you're just all excited to do the first track day and they haven't changed their brake pads, and they might get through one session and not driving too hard, but as soon as they start to use their brakes, they're gone. They're not going to last. And that's because their heat threshold on a stock brake is very low on high, because they're designed to work at very low temperatures, like even below zero. So when you start putting super hard braking into them, the heat goes up and the wear goes up and the friction goes down. Now on my car, on my 2012 track car, my front brakes are typically running 1200 degrees. And so I have a brake pad that is 1200 degrees, is like in between, in the middle of the designed operating range. And that's what you should be doing. That's why you talk to me about what compound is best, because when you start out, I've got a compound that if you're just starting out, will get you through a couple of weekends without having any brake problems. But as soon as you start going faster and faster, then we'll start moving your heat range up. Because if you get the race pads that I use, if you're starting out like a novice or just beginning, you're not going to get them hot enough to really work. They're going to squeal, they're going to make dust. It's just not right. That's why the compound temperature is so important. And the other thing is slotted rotors. I think we talked about this before. Be down just a little bit. You always want to have slotted rotors. You absolutely do not want drilled rotors. I know they look cool. Everybody thinks they're the way to go, but drilled rotors, you start using them on track, they get hot and they will crack at the drills every time. Just absolutely guaranteed. Slotted rotors do two good things. One, they help clear brake dust, and secondly, they relieve the gas pressure that builds up at the back of the brake pads. Now, in the Celine days, we had just flat rotors and really crummy front brakes, and so the brake pads would always do a brake change. Always had like almost half of the brake pads still left at the back, and the front would be gone. And that's because the gases build up pressure at the back of the pad and won't let it sit down on the rotor. So slots let you do that. Also, the two-piece slotted rotors they're a little bit lighter than your factory rotor. They cool a lot better, and because the centerpiece is aluminum, it just keeps heat from migrating from the rotor into your wheel bearing and into your wheel. So even if you don't do anything other, if you're doing a lot of track days, absolutely I recommend the stainless steel brake lines and two-piece slotted rotors. And we have two-piece slotted rotors for just about all the different applications. And then also high temperature fluid. The brakes get hot, brake fluid gets hot, and just plain old factory brake fluid, my tongue goes again. Factory brake fluid will not last won't even last a day if you're driving hard. I mean, the temperatures, it just overwhelms it because, again, they're not designed for that high temperature that you would see at the track. And so this is our street performance product. It's not, like I say, great. It looks good. It's a great brake, and it's totally adequate for track days. We had one customer that ran an entire season of HPAD with a set of these brakes, but with good pads. And the next season, he ran a season on racing in American Iron with the same brakes, but with a good racing pads. And they lasted. It wasn't most optimum. See, he ended up switching over to real race brakes, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But if you're doing like more than a couple track days a year, the next step up from this is the Extreme Plus, which is a little bit bigger 6-piston caliper, and it has a lot thicker brake pad. Brake pad thickness is kind of something people don't look at, but most of your OE brake pads are in the 0.55 inch range. Some are a little less, some are a little bit more, but that's all the wider they are, and that's you really want a wider brake pad, because that brake pad, wider it is, the more heat it'll take. Now the Extreme, the step up from this, has a brake pad that's .71, so it's almost 200 thousandths of an inch thicker, which is good, and it's a big six piston brake pad. So that's kind of like the progression up before you get to racing brakes. And before you get to racing brakes, something you really always want to do is bleed your brakes. Now we had for the workshop, I found an old bleeder bottle that I had laying around, and I showed it, but I didn't really like it, so I called one of our suppliers, and we've got these really nice bleeder bottles, and essentially you just put the little tube on the bleeder, and they're clear because you want to watch the fluid come out. Well, what's nice about this, it's magnet, so it sticks right on the rotor, so you don't have to hold it. You don't have to sit it on the ground where you knock it over. It just sticks right to the rotor, and you can bleed your brakes. And as far as brake fluid, high temperature brake fluid, we used to use like Motul all the time for years and years and years. And Motul's it's a top-notch brake fluid. I mean, I still use it, but it has a dry boiling point of about 580 degrees maybe. And recently, well, not super recently, but recently, Bear has come to market with a really, really nice brake fluid that we switched over to. Has a dry boiling point of 608. So right now, of all the brake fluids we've used, that has by far the highest dry boiling point, and so that's what we kind of switched over to. And that's what you really need, is something with a high boiling point. And the other thing that you have to do, if you're doing more than 1 or 2 track days a year, you need to start thinking about cooling your brakes. Because you start going fast, those brakes are going to get hot. And my brakes run 1,200 degrees with brake ducts. Without brake ducts, they'd be probably 1,800 degrees, and they'll just, that's not good. We do have pads that go to 2,000, but you really don't want to push it up that high. And this is, we were out of brake ducts for S197s for a while because our supplier was in Chicago, and Illinois was pretty much shut down, and some parts still are. But we do have them back in stock now. This is for the S197, and I'll spin this around a little bit and kind of tip you down. The thing about my brake ducts, as you can see, it's oval. It's a 3-inch brake duct. It starts with 3-inch hose. We oval it down, and the reason for that is so that it's mounted. I don't know if you can see that or not, but all of this hole is inside the eye of the rotor. Okay. So all the air is going into the rotor because rotors cool from the inside out. So you want to get as much cool air to the inside as you can. Now there's some like 4-inch brake ducts out there, and we had them in the not World Challenge, the Mustang Challenge. They had the Ford Racing 4-inch brake ducts. But if you can see, if this is 3, and it's all the way in the hole, then a 4-inch is not going to make it all the way in the hole. And if they're round, it's going to be hitting like part of the surface of the brakes. And by doing that, a couple things that aren't optimum happen is, first of all, when air is coming in, it'll crash on the surface, and it kind of goes over to kind of tumble and create some turbulence. But the other thing is it's cooling the inside of the rotor more than the outside of the rotor. And when we did some back-to-back brake testing, my 3-inch brake duct had the same around the same brake temperatures as the 4-inch. The only difference is with my 3-inch, the rotor temperature was the same inside and out, where with the 4-inch, the rotor temperature was hotter on the outside than the inside, which explained why we were getting uneven wear between the inner and outer brake pads. I understand, well, how do you know what the brake temperature was? Well, that's very simple. See this red? That isn't like red paint somebody spilled. That's actually rotor temperature paint. And it starts out red, but as the heat goes up, it'll start changing colors. And it comes with a nice little chart that tells you the different heat ranges of how hot the brakes get. And that's how I know what the brakes run at. Now we've got one of our customers with a GT500, a whole bunch of horsepower, is running like 14 to 1600 degree brake temperatures, because that's a lot of energy. They're going in the brakes. A car is nothing more down the straightaway, nothing more than a big mass of kinetic energy. And the only way to slow the car down is turn that kinetic energy into heat energy, and that's what the brakes do. They make heat. And so he's running some pretty high horsepower, pretty high temperatures, and I'd like him to see him cool down a little bit. And I'm really not comfortable with brakes running that hot all the time. So that's how we know. We have this brake, the brake temperature paint we have in stock all the time. Obviously, the brake ducts are now on the shelf again, and then the brake bleed bottles, and these are pretty cool. I mean, it's a nice thing. Oh, the other thing it does is vented. See it? I don't know if you can see that, but there's a little vent on there, so that you don't have to crack it to let the air out as you bleed. And the other thing, it puts the brake fluid at the very bottom of the bottle. And what's good about that is if you're pumping, and if somebody's pumping the brakes for you, and you forget to get the bleeder tight, and they lift off, and it'll suck brake fluid from the bottom. It won't suck air, which will save you having to do it all over again. And then you can always just put that right on there, so then any residual fluid in there drains right back in. So I mean, that's only like $15. I mean, it's a really smart investment. So this is kind of like a little overview of some of the brake products that we have, and anybody that's out there other than Mustang. Maybe I should put it up here. Other than Mustang, we have, because we're a distributor for Bear, we can have brakes for just about a lot of different cars. So if you're looking for some really good brake packages, call us up. We'll figure out what you need. We'll make sure we can get them for you, and we'll get you sorted out. Plus, we'll come up with the right brake pad combination. It's always, my view is always a street pad for the street, track pad for the track, because there's that temperature thing. I mean, you've got to get the right temperature for what you're doing. And otherwise, it's either they're going to wear really fast, they're going to get hot, or they're not going to have enough friction at all. So with that, I mentioned that we've had a number of people change over to real racing brakes. Now, the story behind this is several years back, I was talking with Bear, and I really wanted to do something special, because actually for my car I was using the big 6 pistons, but the race version, which they were same basic package, but the calipers were reworked for racing, and I wanted something special for our race track customers. So what we talked about is they had a 4-piston brake package that they made for Paul back in 2011. Paul showed up at the first World Challenge race with the Bear 6-piston brakes, and SCCA said no, the rule says 4-piston. So Bear went to work, and they made him a special 4-piston brake setup that he used, obviously, to win the championship going away. And what I found out from Bear is that brake package had just been sitting on the shelf collecting dust. So when we decided to do something special, that was the foundation for where we started with our race brakes. And from that point, I wanted to put every single professional grade option we could into this package. Because if you were out to buy real pro brakes, like a Brembo GTR, for example, for a Mustang is like $800 for an axle set. And that's kind of like a little bit beyond the budget of most people that are doing track days or club racing. So we worked and worked and worked at it, and what we came up with is just totally amazing. I mean, it's totally amazing. Every time I talk about it, I just, I'm so proud and happy. And just to show you what a race caliper looks like, this is a racing caliper. Now, this particular one has been nickel plated, kind of like a Smith & Wesson. I had nickel plated on my car too. They come in any color, but we have these custom built to order because you can pick your color. And standard colors are, I think, black, silver, and red. But beyond that, Bear has a full range of colors. Same thing for any of the brake packages. You pick a color, and we'll get them for you. But as you can see, this is a pretty hefty piece, and it's a 4-piston. I don't know if you can see that or not. It's a 4-piston because the SCCA said they had to have a 4-piston. But the other thing that is nice about this, now the pistons are engineered to be as effective as a 6-piston with 4 pistons. It has to do with the volume in the chamber. But the thing about this is that we went through, and there's a lot of cool things on here. First of all, there's a lot of machining that's done, like here, pockets there, over here, that takes weight out. I mean, they're already lighter than the caliper this side. It takes the weight out. And that's the other thing about a 4-piston. 4 pistons is lighter than a 6-piston, and it's also more cost-effective. And we've got these super strong 7/16 holochrome bolts, which are like beyond the grade 8. And also you still get a lot of brakes, 2-piece brakes, and they have 4 bolts. Well, we've got 6. I mean, there's a lot of clamping force there. The bracket, lost the bracket. The bracket is aluminum, and it's T6 aluminum, and it has ARP studs on it. It also has 12-point nuts, so you get the best possible torque value. And here's a really cool thing. This, see that? That's how you put the brakes in. You just drop them in right from the top. So you talked about a quick brake change. Pop that open, pull them out, put the next ones in, pop it down. Here's the that's the bracket, and this is a radial mount. All these brakes are radial mount. What that means is all your normal brakes like bolt on to the spindle. They're a tab mount. Well, the bracket bolts to the spindle, but the brakes themselves are actually a radial mount, because that's a much better way to mount brakes. And something I tell people is when you do put brakes like these on, something that I do is I've got something I've had for years. In fact, the tubes look like it. It's called copper slip. It's kind of like the really super high grade anti-seize, except it's made out of copper. And it'll take really high temperatures. So I just put a super thin film on the studs and a little bit on the threads, and so it comes time to take it off, it just pops right off. So I mean that's all that's pretty cool all on its own. And then the rotor, I took you down again. This is an R-spec rotor, and you can see the vents. It's like way more vents than a normal brake rotor has. And this is 1.25 inches wide. This other one was like 1.15, something like that. And even though this is a lot wider than the other one, like standard brake, and it's got more fins, it's actually like 3 or 4 pounds lighter. So even though it's got a lot of cooling and the mass, it still is lighter because it's an R spec. And then it's mounted with these little, it's a bobbin. It's not like a regular stud, so it isn't 100% tight. So there's a little bit of float to it for expansion and contraction. So I mean, like I say, we went all out, did everything we could to get a maximum out of a race brake for the club guys. I said that the Brembo GTRs are about like $8,800. These are like $39.95. So just think about that. The features of an almost $9,000 brake package for like $4,000. And I mean, it works really well. Now here's the other thing that's going to kind of blow your mind. This is the brake pad. I don't know if you can see that or not, but that is a 25 millimeter brake pad. That's 0.98 inches thick. That's like an inch thick brake pad. I said all like the typical OE pads are around 0.55. Our extreme 6-piston is 0.710. This is 0.98. Plus, it's the same backing plate as the 6-piston caliper. The exact same backing plate. So you got the same backing plate as the 6-piston with the super thick 1-inch pad, which you can just imagine how much longer that'll last, and also how much better it's going to handle the heat. So that's kind of like my super trick cool race brake package that we developed with Bear. And we have a number of people running them, and everybody says, man, what brakes. They love them. We have them for the S197 and the SN95, both front and rear. Now the rears have like the standard pad on the 6-piston, which is 0.710 as far as thickness, because that doesn't do as much work back there. But yeah, inch thick brake pad. How cool is that? So we kind of talked about a little bit. This is kind of like the real general overview of our brake program that we talked about in the workshop. And what we wanted to do is, because I've done the workshop all week and I'm a little on the tired side, we thought we'd kind of abbreviate this a little bit. So I think kind of switch over to your questions. Switch over to your questions.
Is that my cue?
That's your cue.
Okay.
My cue to drink some coffee.
Well, I'll give you a second to drink coffee. Okay, we have Paul Miller. He says, good morning. For street use, where does the added unsprung weight benefit and better braking performance begin? Are larger brakes better overall despite the added weight?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the brakes itself. I mean, better brakes are always better brakes. The street performance package, I don't think weighs a whole lot more than your stock brakes because it's based off of an OE type pad. And as far as performance, I mean, they're going to stop. You have to do, you're going really fast. You got kind of crazy one night with your friends, and you're going really, really fast, and you hit the brakes hard. I mean, things are going to stop. Where a stock brake sometimes just won't stand up to that. So as far as unsprung weight, I mean, I don't think, I never measured it back to back, but I don't think there's a huge difference. I know the rotors are typically lighter than factory rotors. So without measuring things, I don't have an answer, but I just tell you better brakes are better brakes.
Okay, we have Neil Churchman, sorry. That braking cooling backing plate should be a direct replacement fitment for the bigger Ford plate?
Bigger Ford plate.
Yeah, I'm talking about the brake ducts.
Brake duct. I mean, like as far as the backing plate on the brakes, yeah, you take the factory backing plate off and throw it away, and this bolts right in the same spots. Just same bolts that held the factory one on, backing plate on. This just replaces it like that.
So I guess he has an additional question that's related to that, explaining his question. In other words, same orientation, simple swap out, no need to extra length on tubing, etc. So no, the brake hose tubing.
Yeah, I mean, if he's talking about the 4-inch Ford brake ducts, it's basically in the same place. And if you are talking about the 4-inch brake ducts and you switch to this, all you need to do is like go to Lowe's or Home Depot, and they'll have like plastic reducers. In the garden section, it'll go from 4-inch to 3-inch. In fact, that's a long time ago on the Cobras. They had like a 4-inch fog light, and we get those and put them on there and just plug a 3-inch hose on that top of that. So yeah, it's basically the same orientation. I mean, there's only one place you can throw air into the brakes.
One from Brad. When you replace the rotors, do you replace the rotor hat hardware?
That's a good question. Well, the other thing about two-piece rotors is when they wear out, I mean, you don't throw the whole thing away. You just throw the outer ring away, and you just get a new ring and put it on. I mean, I recommend new hardware every time you do the brake change, because the hardware has been through how many high temperature heat cycles. I think it just makes perfect sense to get a whole new set of hardware when you do a brake change. And that's even like for the two-piece rotors for the street. I mean, for the OE brakes, like if you've got a Mustang or a Boss, same thing when you wear them out. Just you could reuse it. I just recommend getting a new set. I mean, brakes are way too important. Another thing on when do rotors wear out, if you do a lot of track days and you use a lot of hard braking, you see a lot of high temperatures, after a while you're going to see what I call spider cracks. It's a bunch of little teeny cracks running all through the thing. Those are not a concern. The only time it becomes a concern if you can catch your fingernail on one of those cracks, stop using that caliper, the rotor, throw it away. And never ever try to refinish a two-piece rotor. I mean, they're just not designed for that. That could lead to disaster. Just replace it. It's just you look at rotors as a consumable, just like brake pads.
And Wendy asks, how much are replacement pads?
It depends on the pad itself. We have two different pad companies we work with, Hawk and G-Lock, and G-Lock's got I think it's 15 different compounds that I use, and they're actually we're switching a lot of people, track day people, over that. Now the Hawk I still look at for a hardcore race guy, but for the track guys we're switching over to the G-Locks because they're a little bit friendly on rotors, and they're less. They cost less than the Hawks by quite a bit. So it just depends on which pad compound, because obviously the 15 different compounds, they all cost a little different. And if anybody that's watched me before knows that you can ask me anything but part numbers and price. But yeah, they are the ones we use are more cost effective, easier on rotors, and they work real well.
Okay, Brian West, this is regarding the Kenny Brown Pro 4Rs.
Okay.
Are the pistons different bores?
Yep. You always have to have an offset bore. if you can see that. And the reason for that, remember I said that the slots help release that gas out of the back? Well, the same thing with different piston size. They put different amount of pressures on different parts of the pad so you get even pad wear. And they're engineered specifically to, like for any of our brakes for the Mustang, the piston size is engineered specifically to be totally transparent the existing brake system. They have the same basic volume as the stock calipers, so I mean your ABS, your whole brake system doesn't even know the difference. So yeah, they are different size. Plus they're castellated. I didn't tell you that. I don't know if you can see that now. They're called castellated, and they're heavy-duty stainless steel too. And by castellated is just like whole little notches around it. It's like the turret of a castle. And the purpose of that is so there's actually airspace where the piston hits the brake pad. There's little bits of airspace all around, again, to help from transporting too much heat from the pads into the calipers.
And just to correct, Wendy wanted to know how much the 1-inch brake pads were. And I don't have a clue, and I know you don't, but I think it's...
Remember what I said?
It's under
anything with part
400.
numbers and price, we can certainly find that out. But they're, believe it or not, even though they're not like twice as expensive as a regular brake pad, they're only a little bit more.
I think they're like 3 something.
So I mean, it's even though there's like almost twice as much more material, they don't cost twice as much. They cost maybe
Third more.
yeah 60% more. Just I mean, they're not. It's not double the price. It's overall it makes it a pretty good value because you replace this half as many times. It doesn't cost as much as two sets of brake pads.
Okay, and listen to you cough.
Yeah, my asthma.
Okay, so I'm asking the last question. If you have any other questions, submit them now. Otherwise, this will be the last question. Okay, Robert Johns. So Kenny Brown brake set, in other words, the Pro 4Rs, are custom made. And if he wants a different color, what's the lead time? Can you get a different color? I think he's asking.
Yeah, yeah. And any of the bare colors we can get, and they're built to order. So it depends on just how busy they are at the time the order goes in. Just like everybody else, they're kind of running behind now. I would at least 4 weeks, and when we put the order in, we would probably get a better read on that. But like when anything that's custom built, it takes longer than something that's off the shelf because it's well worth it. Just like our JRZs are custom built, and we put the order in, they build them, and ship them over from the Netherlands. Our strain shocks are custom built. They build them and ship them to us. So I would say at least 4 weeks. And yeah, just if you have a specific event, build in some lead time. But yeah, they're wickedly awesome brakes.
And the price on them is just
Yeah,
phenomenal.
I mean, you
too.
compare all the features in here are about what you see in a Brembo GTR for less than half the price, if you can imagine that.
Okay, this is another question from Brad. Is the smaller piston on the leading edge of the pad or the trailing edge?
Yeah, it should be on the trailing edge, I believe. Now, I never looked when they're on the car, but I would say, let's see which side this is.
Answer that next week.
Yeah, I'll get back to you. I would guess because of the pressure, it's on the back. But I guess really I should look, but I've never paid much attention to it. I would guess the back just because of the extra gas in the back. You want to put more oomph on it.
Okay, and then Michael, Michael James Morrison. Hi, Mike. With a V6 and a V8 S197, is the rear kit the same?
Yep. Yeah, the chassis is identical. The rear grip kit's the same for both. So is the front grip kit. They're just different bolt for the motor mount.
I think he's talking brakes.
Oh, brakes? Now on the rear brakes on an S197, I have to talk to you about that because the rear brakes are C-clip, and C-clip has like some in and out motion, and it depends on how much motion your axles have. We've got some different C-clips that are a little bit thicker, but these brakes are hard mounted. The race brakes, they're hard mounted. So if there's too much axle movement you're going to get pad knockback. And that means that, going around the corner, the pad's going to knock back, so when you hit the brakes, it's going to way low, and then you got to pump it up. On my car, I used the different differential that wave track that had almost no movement to it. But unfortunately, they don't produce them for Mustangs anymore. But we do have C-clips. They're a little bit thicker. And also, we can have the rear axle ends cut off and Ford 9-inch axle types put in, which the difference is the C-clip axle goes in, a little C-clip goes on there, pulls back, and that's what holds it in place. With the Ford 9-inch, the bearing is actually on the axle itself. And so the axle and the bearing go in, and there's a plate that bolts on the outside and holds it in place, so it doesn't move. So that's solid. That's what I did to my 93 car, Old Blue. We put the 9-inch axles in there. And they do have the axle ends for 9-inch axles. They're identical to the 8.8. So, I mean, there's a couple different options. It's something we need to talk through.
Tim Tomasek, are there piston boots on the Pro 4Rs?
Nope. No, race pads do not have boots, and the reason for that, they'll just burn them up. And anybody that's done a lot of track days with stock brakes, notice they burn up the boots, and it's a heat thing. So yeah, the race brakes do not have any boots. They're just pistons. Just nothing to get in the way, nothing to catch on fire.
Okay, Joe Johnson. My 2020 Shelby has an OEM brake pad that is very thin. I love the 25 millimeter pads I had on my Boss 302. However, I believe due to the wheels on the Shelby, the larger pads will not fit. Is there any wheel brake combination that I can use for a better brake system? I wear out the OEM pads fast. So I think he has a 350 GT 350.
Yeah, I'd make two recommendations. First, let's get you hooked up with a better brake pad so they don't wear out so fast. And secondly, I'd have to check and see if our gargantuan super mammoth front brakes for the 550 will fit a GT 350 spindle. And if you haven't seen our super mammoth gigantic brakes, they're something to behold. They come with a 15-inch rotor. So you got a 15-inch rotor, and the caliper itself is just almost 15 inches tall. I mean, this is a big caliper. Now, the pads aren't super thick, but they're super big. There's a lot of surface area on them. And it's just a wicked brake package. We also have, for the 550 cars, the Extreme Plus brakes, the step up from the Street Performance. We have that 15-inch front and rear for the 550 cars. So that's a really nice upgrade for Maryland, the super duper track car I built. We put the monster brakes on the front, and we put the 6 pistons on the back with 15-inch rotors. Thing stops like crazy.
Okay, let's see. Paul Miller has a question regarding Crown Vic. Can a larger brake setup be designed for the Ford 8.8 rear, not a Mustang?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. I mean, the 8.8's an 8.8. The only difference is the width. So I would guess you should be able to get a Mustang set up on that. Now, what you probably could do, I would check, but I think the 14-inch upgrade rear brake package would work, and that's on the S197s. We've got an upgrade kit that puts a 15-inch rotor on the back but retains the OE caliper, which is a really nice upgrade. You don't so you don't have to go to a full big brake package in the back. Let's go to a big rotor package, and it increases braking by significantly. So that might be another option.
I know Michael Morris, James Morrison mentioned, this is in regard to something you were just talking about, floater, he said.
Full floater. Yeah, full floater. Now, what a floater is they cut the ends of the axle off, and the bearing, the wheel bearing itself is welded onto the axle. So instead of having a normal axle with a flange and the studs on the outside, it's a double splined axle that slides in. That's probably the absolute best, but it's not inexpensive, and you have to have somebody doing it that really knows what they're doing. I think for most of our average track day guys, I think it might be overkill, but if you're really racing hard, or if you've got a lot of high horsepower car with sticky tires, it might be something considering. What we can always do, we work very closely with Strange. In fact, Strange has come up with a special road race 9-inch rear axle assembly for me, because anybody knows anything about Strange, they're drag race guys. 98% of their business is drag racing. We're a little 2%. And that's why we have our shocks custom built, because nothing they have off the shelf will come close to what we need for coilovers. But we went through and for David's car out in the West Coast, we came up with an absolute true bolt-in Ford 9-inch rear end package with the setup for road racing. So there's an option. We can also, if you want the floater, if you've got somebody, we sell the kits, and if you've got somebody locally that is used to shortening axles, because you have to have special fixture and dies, we can get you a full floater kit. That's not a problem.
And I think, let me look, I think that might be it. Yep. Paul Miller says, great knowledge, thank you.
Well, this is a little shorter than normal, but it's been a long week for me, I can tell you that, with our workshops, and I'm kind of glad we're doing a short day. Last night we did an abbreviated evening. What we moved it from 7:30 up to 5:30, because we know a lot of families plan things Friday night. So we thought if we got a 5:30, then we wouldn't run afoul of the wife's plans. And as we all know, happy wife, happy life. And a couple of people made a comment on that. They were happy for that. And we actually abbreviated it too. So we moved it up and abbreviated it just so we wouldn't run afoul of the wife. Because you always want to keep relations really strong so you can buy more parts, car parts. So she's pointing at something now.
For the people that are in the workshop, what Monday's going to bring?
Oh, for the people that are in the workshop on Monday night, it's kind of going to be the day 6 is actually going to be day 5, and we're going to run through a number of things: and car setup, track day mornings, tire temperatures, cold and hot temperatures, camber, track tuning. We talked about brake bleeding and some driving tips on how to drive one of my cars, because I engineer it specifically for a specific type of driving, which mitigates the weakness of the Mustang and leverages the strengths. So that's going to be a Monday night for workshop people. And like I said, you can still sign up for the workshop, see what's on tap for Monday night, and then watch any of the reruns you want up through midnight on Tuesday. So it's raining like crazy here. I hope it's shiny where you are. So until not next week, 2 weeks. Yeah. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Second Saturday in July, and I certainly wish you all happy 4th of July. I think we're getting to the point where everybody wants to get out and do stuff. I know I do, but I'm still kind of staying cooped up for a little while longer. But yeah, get out and enjoy yourself. Enjoy your car. Roll the windows down, turn the radio off, and listen to the exhaust. That's kind of like therapy. So we'll see you on the 11th. Have a good 4th. Just the button.